Call on Jessie Wu to continue her team's case.
Madam Adjudicator, we thought it was very telling that the negative team stood up and chose to ignore the kind of foster parents who only do it for the money, who take on 4 foster children and then put all of those foster children in one bedroom, who malnourish them, who never support them when they need emotional care or educational care, and who use that money to serve their own ends, who use it to fuel their drinking addiction or who use it to fuel their gambling addiction. We also think that they had a very glib response to the kind of parents who we see being reported to the police as having sexually abused their foster children. We think it's just not good enough that they would pretend these situations don't happen. We'd like to hear a response to it at second. Now, 3 other points of rebuttal today. Firstly, about why they think that this debate is like a debate about orphanages versus foster parents, and why we think that's simply not true. We think, firstly, there are mechanisms to ensure that children under the age of 10 get into systems where they're like with relatives or they're with people who know them, they're with even like godparents or neighbours who have known them for a long time. We think that the government gives financial incentives to these kind of godparents and uncles to take these children who are under 10, and then after that the government uses that money to support foster care. We think it's far better if the government continues to incentivize these relatives and these godparents to make a lasting commitment to these children under 10. Also, we think that, and when we make people commit in the long term, better parenting occurs. We think that even if we were to fight this debate about orphanages, we think that orphanages are, like, in some ways better than foster child, because at least there is regulations to ensure that these children are not sexually abused or are not malnourished. We think, furthermore, that if they are given stability, they are able to have the opportunity to, like, grow in a stable environment where they know they are not going to be shunted to a different school, shunted to a different home in the next week. Okay, on to this second point about, like, how foster parents have commitment. They're like really passionate, and they've dedicated their whole lives to rearing children who are not their own. Firstly, we told you about 3 kinds of parents at Richard, but I'm going to explore like how these well-meaning parents behave and why we think it's still problematic in most cases. So these parents, even if they mean well, are often ill-equipped to deal with these troubled and unstable children. Right? So they're often frustrated because that child doesn't listen to them and doesn't open up to them. The child isn't what they expected. They're not some kind of wounded pet project that these foster parents can fix with love. And when these foster parents get calls in the middle of the night because their foster child has been caught tagging for like the 4th time in 1 month, their exasperation makes them give up on that foster child, and they run away from the problem because they haven't made any kind of legal commitment to it, and they send that child back to the system. We see, furthermore, we see like the kind of parents who are really experienced and really dedicated and do dedicate their whole life to the foster system, would be open to adopting and making a permanent commitment to these foster children. So we think we keep the benefits of these kind of people under our model, where we incentivize more people to adopt, especially these passionate people who see there is no other way for these children to have care. We'd like to hear a response to the 2 other kind of parents that exist under the status quo. We'd like to hear more than a glib denial of the problem. Okay, so then we heard this idea that like foster care is best for kids, right? And better than institutionalization. I've already responded to this in some extent, but we think that even if they are institutionalized, unless it's like they have stability, they have regulations, they are able to make like support systems in their schools because they know they're not going to leave the school in the next month. They're able to have friends around them, and they're able to make these connections, which is really good for their personal growth. Okay, on to my substantive point about the lasting effects on children after they leave the foster care system. Okay, so when a foster child has been stuck in a foster care system since the age of 12, and they've been labelled as a troublemaker, they've been put in category 1, they have an asterisk next to their name when it comes up on like the computer system. Their response is to retreat into themselves and hide behind like a constructed shield so they can't be hurt by other people. So they distance themselves emotionally from other people, because in the past, the people who they've been told at like 13 are the parents that are going to take care of them and are finally going to give them a home, have often given up on them and put them back into this system. Because they're shunted around from home to home, and they know that they're probably going to have to change schools in the next 6 months, they also end up not reaching out to make friends. Because in the past, they've been uprooted as soon as they've made an emotional connection to someone else, as soon as they've settled in and let themselves be comfortable. They try to minimize that hurt by not becoming emotionally invested. We think that if this lasts into their adult life, they're less likely to be able to make meaningful connections, like in the workplace, with friends, in terms of relationships. We think when families are something we can or at least a home, is something that we can all fundamentally rely on to be there at the end of the day. This is the bedrock of permanence and support, and it's something that gives us the courage to try hard. It's something to give us the courage to reach for goals and to strive to achieve, because we know that even if we fail and even if we make mistakes, we're not going to be in a system that chucks us out onto the streets because we weren't good enough for them. When we know that there will always be a home, there will be a warm meal, and there will be a familiar face at the end of the day, we are far more open to making these meaningful social connections, to trying for things that are beyond our reach. Foster children are denied this because the bedrock of stability and support is gone. They see everything as temporary, so they slowly stop putting themselves out there. They don't go and establish roots. They don't, in schools, they don't join clubs and societies and do extracurriculars, because they don't even know if they're going to be there in like the soccer playoffs. They don't even know if they're going to be there when the debating tournament happens, right? So even if they can't stay with their biological families, and even if these biological families need time to rehabilitate and get over their drinking problem so that eventually maybe the child can come back to them, we think it's still much better if they have a permanent home they can rely on. For example, relatives, for example, adoptive parents, for example, like even becoming a ward of the state, because they need to know that somebody is there for them and that somebody will be like that, even if they fail and even if they don't achieve their goals, they will still have something to fall back on, and they will still have a support system that doesn't change every 6 months. We think stability and safety is a basic need that all of our other needs, including the need to self-actualize, relies on, and it can't be realized without it. Madam Adjudicator, today, because we've dealt with what happens in the real world, instead of denying the kind of terrible parents who exploit the foster system for the money and mistreat these kids, and today, because we stand for the importance of stability and the importance of security as a basis to build our other systems on, we are very, very proud.